right? So glucose is going to move, and note, pretty much, it moves easily. But one of the things with glucose can and will follow sodium. So if the sodiums are present, glucose tends to follow also. Do you guys remember movement of materials like symport, antiport? Do you all remember that type of movement? Okay, should have been taught in part 1 at that cellular level. When we have molecules, in some cases, we can have molecules, 2 or more, that will go across that cell membrane together. That would be symport, symbiotic, together, working together, okay? So these types of ports, okay, that area that would allow the movement across the plasma membrane, and they would be called a symport. In some cases, they move in opposite directions. If we have one chemical available, a second chemical, they can have, if they are near that plasma membrane, because they travel opposite each other, one would go one direction, one would go the other. So that would be an antiport. Most of the ports are going to be proteins, okay, a protein structure in the plasma membrane. And then antiport, symport, moving together, moving opposite. Some are going to be specific. For example, an anion, the negative ions, okay, will have a port. And then cells, this is amazing. Cells can create, maybe I should say, increase their number of an aquaporin. Aqua means what? Water. So if there's too much water, these cells could increase their number of aquaporins, a port for just the water. If there's not enough, they can decrease the number, helping to control that movement of water through this system. So I have the ability at this point across the cell itself to have sodium and glucose move, to have sodium and H+, but they move in opposite directions of each other. I can have the ability for a chlorine or other negative ions to move, okay? And then I can have the ability for water. Now, on the basal side, materials that made it across the cell, look what happens. They will go across that basal membrane and make their way back to the bloodstream. Is everybody following me? They're just simply moving across the cell. Requires some energy, requires ports for this to take place. I can also have materials move between the cells. And in some cases, it could be moving simply because of water or these other products being available, and they follow each other. Now, why, at this point, is it clinically significant to have movement of these materials cross? And one in particular, my glucose, I want to return. I don't want that coming out in my urine. But also, my ions, my electrolytes, I want to make sure those get back across. I want to make sure chlorine gets back to the system, because all of those are important in cell function. Now, another way clinical significance shows up. This is something, oh man, they are so going to drill this into you when you get into your programs, okay? A person who would have kidney issues. A person who may have diabetes, all right? What do you think is going to happen to the movement of these materials at this level or being found at the tissue level of the body? Alex?
They probably have reduced reabsorption rates.
They would have reduced reabsorption.
So more in the urine or stuff.
More glucose could show up in the urine, so could more ions, or for the ions, vice versa. That could get stuck behind in tissues, leading to, for example, fluid buildup in the tissues. And if that's the case, if they end up with fluid buildup in the tissues, salt concentrations and so forth are off. Water's being held behind.
So I know often when people take diuretics, Lasix, and water pills, they also have to take supplemental potassium.
Yes.
Is it because they're losing water, or is it just because the kidneys aren't functioning as well anyway, and so they would naturally?
A lot of it's going to be, if they're getting rid of the water, note what can flow with water. Potassium's one of them. Also, potassium's in the body. Yeah, they're very important. We know that. And one of the things that happens with potassium across the plasma membrane, it's not really having the control that sodium does. Potassium has little proteins in that plasma membrane that allow it to simply just go boom, 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 back, forth, cross, 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 cross. There's no control. So they would be readily available to wash out with the water. So that could be one of the reasons that they, in some cases, the people may have high potassium and have to watch stuff they eat, drink, and that sort of thing. Some cases, they might have to take a potassium supplement. So when you get into your programs, and because this is going to be one, this fluid balance, okay, that's going to be a topic you're going to encounter a lot, okay, in your programs, because it's so important, all right? And this is the point where a lot of things are going to happen, because if it's happening here in the kidneys, then we get to the tissue level, and you know, fluids off balance, salts are off balance. That means everything can be messed up, okay? So they're going to want you to understand why, say for example, water may stay behind at a tissue level. Like a person having fluid buildup, say, I don't know, their lower legs, ankles, and feet, okay? And remember, that could be due to maybe kidney issues, lung issues, okay, because that's going to affect the kidney's function, okay, heart, okay. So pay attention to what the issue is that the patient has, because they're going to give you the little case studies on this, and try to think about what is it that's happening. Are salts being left behind, dragging more water in? Is water not going out, or salts not going out at the kidneys? Okay, these are the ways they're going to want you to think about it for this electrolyte balance, fluid balance, and so forth, which is what Chapter 24 is. But like I said, we have discussed it so many times that hopefully when y'all read over Chapter 24 for your test, you're going to be like, that's what she meant. that salt's staying behind. That salt's not balanced, okay? So the kidneys functioning correctly basically is going to affect every system because calcium phosphate can move. Calcium phosphate are not properly balanced in the body. You're going to see heart muscle be affected. You're going to see bone be affected. You're going to see nerve be affected. Okay? So this is why the proper functioning of the kidneys becomes so important. So a big, disease that we have in the United States is diabetes. All right? Yes, we have type 1, which is the one that, is, I think that's the, do they call it inherited?
Yeah.
For type 1, inherited, okay. Type 2, usually due to lifestyle, okay. Either way you look at it, both of them affect your lifestyle, okay. And some people who are type 2 can actually be insulin dependent and have to take shots and so forth. So glucose, one of the things that becomes important, returning glucose to our body. Glucose, okay, one of the big things to remember, it is the only nutrient the brain can use, okay? And then it's the smallest, it's the molecule that can move most readily across the plasma membrane of cells to be used for ATP production. It's the molecule that will go through the entire process, glycolysis into the mitochondria to produce the ATPs. Any other material at the cellular level used to make ATP enters at a different level in the mitochondria. Okay? Doesn't go through glycolysis. The only thing that goes through glycolysis is the glucose. So glucose is important for our energy production, okay? So one of the things that will happen, at this point of that nephron, at the PCT, the movement of all these materials, there is a maximum that can be moved. If the material exceeds the maximum, whether that's going to be the salts, the glucoses, whatever the case might be, okay? If the amount of it exceeds the maximum of what those cells at this level can move, it continues forward. Some of that is okay, all right? Because at other parts of the nephron, it can move. At other parts of the collecting duct, it can move. But the one place that glucose can move is at this PCT. If the body has not utilized it correctly, it exceeds the maximum at this point of the nephron. And even though the cells have the ability to create the little proteins that can act as the ports, okay, they can only do so much. So whatever exceeds the maximum that can be moved at the level of the PCT, it will continue into the filtrate. Glucose, not good. Even with salts, we can exceed that maximum. A good example is at the time of exercise. At a time of strenuous exercise, okay, we can lose more salts this way. We can lose a lot of those salts in the sweat of the body, okay? We need to kind of replace them. So sometimes tend to drink like those energy drinks and that sort of thing, okay? Don't ask me about those, okay? In cases where somebody's like a pro football player, a Olympian athlete or something, yeah, they need it.